Hi, cuties. It's time to get hot. I asked a bunch of you to give me some hot takes or some controversial opinions, and I would be reacting to them on this episode of Litmas. I have put your hot takes. Some of them are big, so it's going to be hard to grab everybody, but I'm very excited about this. I love reacting to hot takes and seeing where I stand on them, and seeing just other opinions. I'm excited about this. So let's begin. Okay, this is our first one. It's a little bit of a paragraph. This is from Noah. Some people put their name, some people didn't. I asked if you wanted to, so Noah did. A lot of the rant reviews about smutty books come from a place of sex negativity and anti-kink. It's okay if someone doesn't like certain kinks, but if they read a book knowing that it's about certain kinks, like Omegaverse, they shouldn't use the fact that it has Omegaverse against that book. Don't like, don't read. On the other side of this, books should be advertised properly, and there should be more trigger warnings so that readers can avoid the book if they want to. Absolutely. Now, I think I fall into this a little tiny bit, because I have my series, Is This Book Good or Are You People Just Thirsty? And that's my evaluation of smutty books as someone who does not enjoy smutty books. But my evaluation for them is about, like, was the smut purposeful and was there also plot? So, yeah, it can be an opinion on that. But I do agree, I do think some people who do hate on, especially like the dark romance category a lot, are doing so are coming from that place. So I do agree that that's likely where a lot of rant reviews do come from. I used to be a lot worse about judging people for their reading tastes and stuff. I'm getting better at it. Or just getting better at not doing that. I'm getting better at judging people. I'm not a dark romance person. I do have some dark romance on my shelves that I will be evaluating. But not from a, hey, this book was advertised as being smutty and it has smutted it and therefore it's bad. I'm not going to do that. I do think that a lot of books do suffer from poor marketing, especially in the traditional world. People will be like, oh, it's ACOTAR plus the Hunger Games or something. And it's like, it's not that at all. They're just telling you the big name sellers to get you to buy it. And I do think that needs to stop. And that marketing companies and publishers in general need to put more faith in the books that they are publishing rather than just making this a money market, because we want quality reads, you know? We don't want just garbage all the time. I mean, every person's, trash read is their own, but yeah, I don't think we should be marketing something that's YA into the smutty stuff. I don't think that's a good idea. But, and then there should be more trigger warnings. I think I agree. So far, I agree with this hot take. Thank you, Noah. To the next one. Nobody put their name on this one. A book should reach the end of the synopsis by the 25% mark. If we don't get to the setup of your book listed on the synopsis until the 60% mark, then I don't care how good it is, it's not getting more than 2 stars. I think that's fair. I think, yeah, by the 25% mark, and actually that might be good writing advice for people. Like, hey, if you're trying to write a synopsis, you should include a lot of that, what happens there. I think that's pretty fair. I don't necessarily agree with 2 stars for that. I'd probably say 3. Like, it's fine. Would have liked it to get to this point sooner. So maybe I disagree on the 2 starring. For me, 2 star is there's something objectively bad about this book. 1 star is there's something offensive. That's how I do my stars. But star ratings are subjective and people do them differently anyway. So I agree with half of this sentiment. Let's do this one. Piracy isn't always a bad thing. Might not necessarily be good either. Might simply be neutral. What it is depends on the case. I can agree with that. Certain cases of piracy, I would say, might be more ethical than other things. At least in the bookish world, I would say if you can avoid piracy, please do so. And please get them directly from the author that you want to read. But mayhaps that author is problematic, but you still want to read them, but you don't want to give them any of your money. I would say it's a little bit more okay to do a piracy. It's up to you. It's up to you. Allie Hazelwood is an awful writer, and I feel people only pick up her books because the covers are cute. parentheses, I am a victim of her cute covers. I wouldn't necessarily say she's an awful writer. I don't necessarily, I enjoyed The Love Hypothesis. I didn't enjoy Love on the Brain. I don't necessarily think she's an awful writer. I think she's just decent. I think she's fine. She's an average romance writer. In my opinion, she might be an amazing writer to somebody else. I think that's a subjective thing. I do think that the cute covers definitely are a helpful selling point to her stuff. But disagree, I wouldn't say awful, but you know, not the best. But that's totally subjective and you're entitled to that opinion. NetGalley should not allow people to have more than 100 unreviewed books. I actually agree with that. I think there should even less. I think maybe even like 50 or something. Because 100's a lot. I don't know how many I currently have that are unread. Not 100. But this is the current number I have of unread as of this video. I'm currently in NetGalley November though, so I am reading a ton of my ARCs right now. But I do think there should be a bigger limit before. And I also think there should be a, oops, I didn't mean to request this button, you know, and that doesn't hurt your thing. Or there should be an unrequest, because I've done this issue where I've accidentally requested a sequel to a book I have not read yet, not realizing it was a sequel. And now it's going to sit there for way longer than it needs to because I haven't gotten to the first book. I know I have like at least 3 or 4 books in my current NetGalley that are sequels because it didn't necessarily say it right away in the synopsis, and I need to do better about looking for that, but it needs to either be in that title of book 2 or book 3 or something, because I'm bad at that and I think they need a button that lets us go, oops, didn't mean to request that. You can have it back, but not hurt your ratio. I think they should have that. So that's my opinion. And that would also help with the 100. So I agree. How far should authors listen to their fan base? I.e. killing, not killing favorite characters, changing plots entirely to fit fan fiction series they like. I don't think authors should listen to their fan base at all when it affects their writing. I think authors should have their full control over it, and that listening to outside influences when you're not necessarily seeking that and just like caving to that peer pressure almost, I don't think that's a good writing tactic. I think the authors need to have integrity in their authorial intent, you know. So personally, I don't. I think maybe a fun thing here or there is fine. Like I would love for my next book, Isobo, like there's a lot of little creatures and critters. So when I was first writing the first book, I asked for people to submit some little creatures that they'd love to see appear. They're not going to be necessarily big plot points, but they might appear. And that's a fun nod to be like, hey, I heard what you said and I put this in for you as a little like, thank you. But fully changing the main plot of your book just to appease fan fiction, I don't think that's a good idea at all. I think that destroys what you intended, what you first set out to do in your book. So that's what I would say. Oh, slightly chunky one. This one is kind of a lot of opinions in one. Sorry if it's rambly and doesn't make sense. Okay. It seems like every few years, there's a huge panic about the quality of books, especially books that are marketed towards women. We're seeing this now with Book Talk, but this also happened with 50 Shades of Grey and Twilight from what I remember. On one hand, it's frustrating seeing books get really popular and authors get paid a bunch of money when their product doesn't match the hype. On the other hand, trashy literature has always existed, and I don't think that a lot of the big voices that are complaining about the quality of literature are looking at it from a big picture and examining it from a socio-historical lens. There's something to be said about TikTok publishing reading trends and the quality of books for sure, but I don't think the majority of people are handling this discussion very well. Like, why are people using individuals' TikToks to say that a trend exists, but not any actual research? That was a lot, but I think I get your overall sentiment. I do think that a lot of people utilize social media to trash on books and to adjust trends. Now, the publishing market really is the one who controls trends. They're the ones that will pay their, influencers to push a certain book. And yes, usually especially the trends that are on like on the what are popular to hate on are books for women. Chick lit gets hit on all the time. I hate that it's even called chick lit, because it's demeaning. It feels demeaning. On the one hand, it tells me, hey, this is going to be a rom-com and I'm going to want it, you know? But I do think that it's not necessarily the quality of writing is going bad or is declining or anything. I think the problem is it is so easy to publish a book now with self-publishing. And that's different from, you know, decades past where traditional was really the only way you could go about it. Or publishing houses, independent houses as well. Now we have an immediate, not to use the name draft to digital, but we have that ability to just write something and throw it up on Amazon without any further thought or processes. People can just do it. People can AI stuff and put it up on Amazon and try to make money off of it. I do think that's a big problem. And that is less so a problem with people's ability and more so a problem of the accessibility now betraying us, and now kind of letting people who have not put in all the work just put stuff up. So I think we're getting an oversaturation of less quality because social media can be utilized to promote things that haven't been like thoroughly edited and stuff, because people want the quick cash grab. So I do think there are people who have lost integrity because of this method. And I do think there are still books that are highly quality and stuff. They take longer to publish though, and they don't have necessarily the resources on their social media. If they have a smaller following or something, they're not going to be able to promote it like some other people who can afford to like send this to an influencer and pay them to do that. Not all influencers, you know, are paid to show you the stuff, but a majority of the ones are. And sometimes those influencers apparently are not even reading the books. And they're just doing what they're told, like an ad, just a regular old ad. You know, it's like when a celebrity endorses some kind of product that they don't actually probably use. They're just getting paid to do the commercial. It's the same kind of thing. And I think that's the bigger issue that needs to be looked at. This one has 3 topics on it from one person. All they wrote, they didn't write an opinion. They just wrote topics for me to discuss. Number 1, tropes in summaries. I don't necessarily love tropes in summaries. I think sometimes people don't even know the actual trope and they're just saying the trope because that will sell. So, not a huge fan of tropes in summaries. Spice in YA. No. No. Because it's YA. It is not an adult read. There should not be erotica in YA books. YA is about coming of age. Okay? Now, that's not to say that YA books can't have a character have smicks. I don't know if I'm going to get docked on YouTube for saying that word, but I'm saying it that way anyway. I do not think it should be an open door scene, though, because developing brains and stuff. I think it's an important topic. I think that kind of education is important, but I don't think it's a spicy thing. Because see, the difference is for the audience. Sorry, I had a phone call and I lost my track of thought. But no, I don't think there should be spice in YA. I think if there's going to be any kind of spicier stuff, that it should be not classified YA or closed door, because I don't think it's appropriate for younger minds. Because YA is a range from like 13 to 18, sometimes 12. And that I wouldn't want a 13-year-old reading graphic stuff like that. That's, you know, up to the parent, but I don't think, I think in general, any kind of adult content is adult. Publishing fanfic. No, you can't do that. No. Do not publish fanfic. That's illegal. It's illegal. If you publish your fanfic, it's illegal. I'm also kind of like, I don't really care for people who write their fanfic and then just change the names, because I don't necessarily think that you didn't create those characters. You know, those are not original to you, even if you change the name and like the concept, like if it's an AU or something, the concept's original to you, but you were playing with other people's work and did not have those original character thoughts. So don't publish your fanfic. No, I don't think you should. Sarah Cakes said, classics is not a genre. It's a classification. Anytime I see someone saying they prefer to read classics, they're telling me absolutely nothing about what they enjoy. I agree that it's not a genre, because you can have a classic fantasy, you can have a classic mystery, you can have certain different kinds of classics. I do think a person telling me that they only enjoy the classics does tell me a bit about them, and it tells me that they're pretentious. But I agree, it's not a genre. Same thing, YA, not a genre. This is the only reason I don't use Storygraph, by the way, is because it puts YA as a genre in their graphs. And if they would just stop that, I would join Storygraph in a heartbeat. But until then... No, you're messing up the graph, because there's YA contemporary, there's YA fantasy, there's YA sci-fi, there's YA thrillers. You can't do that. Ah! Kimmy asked, or says, massive haul/unhauls are wasteful and consumerist. If that's the only way to get a hold of a book, I understand. But most of the time, no one actually reads the things they haul and end up getting rid of them because they're not interested anymore. Just use your local library and save some money. I feel like that was a personal attack. No, I totally get this sentiment. It's why I'm unhauling, but I'm not unhauling because they don't interest me anymore. I'm unhauling because I do have access to my library. So I think that's a mentality that I do think a lot more booktubers are doing. And I think we're doing the unhaul because unhauls are kind of fun content. They do get people clicking on the videos. I will say that. Hauls do get people clicking on the videos. Yes, it is very consumerist. I think that, if that's negative or not, it depends on the person, because that's their lifestyle choice. That's their money. They can do what they want with them. So I agree to an extent. I do think, yeah, they're not interested anymore. People should use their library more. Again, my Libby app is a lifesaver for me. I love it so much. Do I love necessarily going to the library to pick up physical books? No. Because, okay, this is a dumb aesthetic thing. Physical library books have that library binding on them, and it goes crinkle, crinkle, and I don't like that. I know it's to protect the books, but I don't like the feeling of reading a library book because it sticks to my hands. Because I have sweaty hands sometimes, and that plastic covering will make my hands sweaty, and I don't like that. You can't take it off because it's taped in, and if you try to untape it, it destroys the book. So... that's my one problem with getting physical books from my library. I do love being in a library, though. The vibe, the scent, the peacefulness in a library. Very nice. Libraries are great. And they have great services that you can use for a multitude of things. So you should do that. But the Libby app, the library apps, love them so much. Love, 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 love. So, 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 so much. I wish it was a little easier to request books on Libby. With my library. I wish there was like an easier, like streamlined means of doing that. Because the only problem is like indie books. It's very difficult for indies to get their books in libraries. They have to be requested. Sometimes you can just go in and they'll take your book and stuff, but having the digital versions of it onto your library app can be very difficult. So if you know of indie authors, go request our books for your library so they can get them. Okay? I think it's weird when people ask how many of your books you've read. I treat my bookshelves as a wine cellar, not a trophy case. Most are there because I haven't read them and would like to. This, like, I'm back on the consumerist. It's a different one. Different take. I also agree that it's a little weird when people ask, because I have an entire room of unread books that we're sitting in right now. And that's not true. I've read those. I've read those over there. That's it. Yeah, I think it's almost in the same vein of that. It's like when people ask a writer, well, how many books have you sold? So your value is only numerical. And I don't like that. I agree. I do agree. I do like treating this as a wine cellar. I'm curating it to what I want, and I'll get to them. Brandon Sanderson is overrated. No comment. I love Brandon Sanderson. Do I think he's overrated? It depends on the context of overrated. I think certain ways he can be overrated and other ways not. I think he is an underrated YA author. I think he is a well-rated connoisseur of world building. I do think he is a pro at world building. But, you know, certain character work, maybe he's a little overrated on. It's weird with Brandon Sanderson is one of those gray area authors for me because there is the controversial stuff where he is a Mormon, right? And so the Mormon church does a lot of anti-LGBTQ stuff. And, you know, they, like, I don't know if Brandon actively does this, but they, like, when you're in a Mormon church, they, like, take a certain amount of your income. So that would indicate that Brandon Sanderson does give money to an anti-LGBTQ organization. And that's bad, right? But there's also that he has shown growth, and he has been like, you know what? I used to think this way about the queer community, and I don't think that way anymore. And I think that's been a really great step. I think he's done a lot of work on himself that way. So I appreciate that's been done. I also think he does a great job of uplifting indie voices and sticking up for us, especially in terms of like the Audible situation that he did, Kickstarter and stuff. I do think he does a lot of good. So it really depends on the context of where he's overrated. Is he an overrated writer? I think it depends. Do I think Stormlight? I think Stormlight might be overrated. I like Stormlight, but I do think it's overrated. I like Mistborn. I don't know if Mistborn's overrated. I really like Mistborn. I think Skyward's underrated. I think some of the secret projects were overrated. And that's it. From Amara, another talking about overhyped and overrated, The Will of the Many is an overhyped book. I can't speak to that because I haven't read it yet. I do own a copy now because I don't have access to it on audiobook on my library. It is a big chunky book, so I'm interested to see how that goes. Maybe it is overrated. I'll let you know after I've read it. Once I've read a paperback, I want there to be creases in the spine and not have my shelf look straight out of a bookstore. I disagree. I don't want damaged books. I love pristine books because I would love to live in a bookstore. So that's your own personal opinion. We're gonna disagree on it. This is a case of agree to disagree where it actually works. Not in other situations, it doesn't. Okay. Non-disabled actors don't deserve Oscars for playing disabled roles. I think for the most part, I agree with this sentiment. I think there are certain cases, I mean, I'm not saying, it's not that actors shouldn't be playing these roles because sometimes that there's just not people with those disabilities that are acting. So I do think those stories are still important to be told. Getting an Oscar for it. There's a lot of things I don't think people deserve Oscars for. I don't like the Oscars in general. I think they are just like it's kind of like literary fiction for me, where it's just a pain fest, and the most painful performance you can give is going to get you the Oscar, and things that I think are more entertaining don't get Oscars, even though they're worth more to me than like a very dramatic, sad story. So I think I can mostly agree with that sentiment. Jamie said, the fated mate trope needs to die already. It undermines everything that makes romance worth reading. Hashtag sorry, not sorry. Hashtag I said it. And I agree with you. I despise fated mates. I think it is a cop-out for relationships because a lot of times when it's a fated mate situation, in no other circumstances would those characters be together. Zero reason why they would be together. Doesn't make sense to me. So it's very rare that you can make a fated mate trope work for me. I think the only time that I have enjoyed a fated mate is in Green Creek series by TJ Klune, because even though it's like sort of a fated mate thing, they still have a choice. Yeah, I haven't really seen fated mates done well except for that, I think. Is there another one I've seen done well? Not really. Not that I can think of off the top of my head. Let me know if there's been a fated mates that made sense to you. Because otherwise, I hate it. A lot of book talk books are very tell, don't show, and don't really incentivize critical engagement with the book. 100%. Sorry. A lot of them, yeah. A lot of them are purely gratuitous writing and not, and quick cash grabs. Not all, but a lot. Adults reading middle grade and YA and then saying that they don't identify is weird. I mean, yeah, because I don't think it's necessarily about age to identify with an experience. Like, I love reading YA in middle grade, and I can still relate to those characters, even though, yeah, I'm 37. But the emotions, the feelings of those characters, you can relate to that. You don't have to relate to, you know, that you were once a teenager and middle grader. Like, you should be able to relate, I think. You might not fully enjoy the experience of going back there, but I think you should be able to. Queer romance books are better than straight romance books because most straight romance relies on conflict/tension between the main characters, while queer romance relies on external challenges. I would mostly agree. I do think there's some good straight ones out there, but more often than not, a lot of straight romances deal with like the miscommunication trope, and queer romances do tend to focus more on the external factors. I think there are some queer romances that do also focus more on the conflict tension between the characters. I think that's a hit or miss. I think overall probably agree with that, but there are exceptions. I've got another chunky one. Authors without the same lived experience as their character not being able to write that character is censorship. Frankenstein was written by a woman. Anna Karenina was written by a man. Should their books not be written because they were not the same gender as their character? If cishet authors are allowed to write only cishet characters, then gay authors can write only gay characters. Lived experience can inform someone's writing, but should not restrict their ability to create. In the past, the only authors accepted were upper-class European white males. Over time, and with a great deal of effort, people of all colors, nationalities, classes, and genders are accepted and respected authors. To say this lower-class white female or that black cis male can only write about their own lived experience is imposing outside control on their ability to create. If the work is written as autobiographical, truth, or historical fact, falsely claiming status and membership is wrong. But fiction, as a work of the author's imagination and invention, should only be limited by their ability to create. This I really agree with. And it goes with something that R.F. Kuang had said. When I was watching her for the first time, because I've seen her twice now, she talked about this and about authors being pigeonholed, and she doesn't ever want to be pigeonholed. That's why she wrote Yellowface, which is about a white woman, and R.F. Kuang is a Chinese woman. And she didn't want to be pigeonholed. She wanted to write this experience of this very unhinged character. And that was her advice, is that you shouldn't feel pigeonholed to only write your experience. Where authors were empathetic, were meant to step into the shoes of others. That being said, even in fiction, if you are writing outside of your lived experience, you should not be writing off of the stereotypes that you know from your lived experience. You should be seeking out sensitivity readers and doing your research. So you can't just like pretend that you know the experience of those characters. I think obviously you should write outside of your comfort zone. You should write and explore those characters, but you should be respectful and do your research, and not just say do your research, but actually do it. Read other work that are autobiographical works of people's with those experiences. I think you should be able to take inspiration from those experiences and then have sensitivity readers, people of those backgrounds, help you make it accurate and make it good and make it so that it's not offensive. That, I think, is very important. More than anything, because if we only write that it is a form of censorship, it's boxing people in on a creative endeavor. So I definitely agree that writers need to be able to write diversely, but respectfully. There's the tagline. Write diversely, but respectively. Our final two. I don't always support boycotting books because of something the author did. I think the canceling happens too fast and goes too hard. Sometimes for pretty minor and or old things, especially the old things that were acceptable in the time period they were said. I mostly agree. I do think sometimes the canceling does happen too fast. And I know I can get black and white about certain things. I disagree that we shouldn't cancel for things that happened in the past. I think what happens there, and it's a reason why I don't really like Stephen King. So I'm going to use him as an example. It has a scene in it. The book It has a scene. It's a very problematic scene. Okay. It involves children, and children shouldn't be not doing things. And when people asked him about this, he brushed it off and said that was just the time or whatever. And that's the part that made me go, I suddenly don't trust you. Instead of owning up to a mistake. That's where I have the issue. So I do think it's important to bring those things up to allow that person to show that they've grown and learned from the mistake they've made. And that's the other thing about, like, even stuff that people are doing that is new. I think we should be giving people grace to grow and learn from that. It's the same thing with TJ Klune. He got a lot of backlash for House in the Cerulean Sea because people interpreted, and I can't speak to all these different experiences, but he mentioned, I think it's in the back of House of the Cerulean Sea, that he was inspired by I'm going to get it wrong, something scoop, the 60 scoop? Is it the 60 scoop? About Indigenous people being, like, taken away from their families, and that inspired him to write House in the Cerulean Sea. And people took that as him taking away voices. That is totally up to your opinion. I personally don't know if it took away voices. I do think that it, like, for someone like me that didn't know about the 60 scoop in general, that it helped me go, oh, that's an interesting thing. Let me go research that. So it paved a bridge for certain people, and for others, people were very offended by it. Now, TJ Klune made that mistake, and I remember reading an article where he did address this and did apologize for how that was interpreted. And I don't think people have given, like, that situation the grace of, oops, I made a mistake. And that's another, like, kind of pigeonhole-y situation where people were like, he made the kids monsters because that's what he views the Indigenous people as. And I'm like, I personally disagree with that. I think he made them fantasy monsters because he was writing a fantasy book, and it was to show, how the outside world viewed them, even though they were not evil monsters and stuff. So I think that's open to interpretation. That's my own take on it. You can disagree with me, and that's totally fine. You can also, if you want to talk to me more about it and give me more perspective, that's also totally fine. I'm open to that. But there are certain situations where I do think more grace needs to be given and allowed. Granted, I totally get that people of color are like, they're just so sick of white people shit. Totally, 100% understand that. As a white person, I'm sick of white people shit too. Okay? I'm really sick of it. It was last month. Right. Yeah. So that's also totally acceptable to just be like, you know what? I don't care what they said after that. Them doing that was just stupid and wrong, and I'm blocking them. That's totally okay. That's fine. But I would like for people to be allowed a bit more grace to learn. Now, there are other people out there who just double down or triple down or quadruple down or infinity down on being a terrible person. J.K. Rowling. They refuse to learn and grow and refuse to admit them being wrong. Those people I think we're okay canceling. I think we're okay doing that. The last one we have. Most new fiction focuses too much on having a really punchy opening line. I mean, your opening line is really important, but so is the rest of the book. So yeah, I can kind of agree with that. Well, that was a lighthearted hot take to end this video on. Those were the hot takes that you guys sent me. You are always welcome to discuss these with me, or if you have another take you want me to react to or discuss with me, feel free to do so in the comments below. I like making these kinds of videos and just reacting and opening up the conversations about these topics. I don't claim to be the end all on the opinions of these. These are just my opinions on them. I am always open to change of opinion as well. I am not a person who is black and white about everything. Some things, yes, but you can change my mind. It's not hard. I'm a gullible person. I'm just kidding. You can change my mind. You can convince me. So yeah, if you have any takes that you want to talk to me about, you think I should be aware of, if there's problematic authors out there you think I need to be more aware of, let me know. I don't know them all, but I know a good handful. So cool. All right. I'm going to go now. See you tomorrow, cuties. Bye. That makes sense? I hope that made sense. Why is Walgreens calling me? There's a fly in this room and you need to go away. Ah!